What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today with the must starts and sits at running back and wide receiver. You guys gave a lot of positive feedback in the comment section last week, so I'm doing it again. We're going through 20 players today, 5 must starts, 5 must sits at running back, and same thing for wide receivers. Of course, these will not be the obvious names. I'm pretty sure you guys know by now to start Deebo Samuel and DeAndre Swift and some of the guys that have been performing. I'm going to be talking about guys that are outside the top 20 or so at running back, outside the top 25, 30 or so at wide receiver that I think are great starts this week or great sits this week. Recap basically of the start sit videos that I do throughout the week, and also a recap of the DFS articles that I write for draftsharks.com, which you guys can check out. I'll link those in the description if you want to check them out. Now let's ride. Okay, at running back, as you guys can see, there is 5 must-start running backs on the screen. The first one on the docket is Damian Williams. He is my must-start running back number 1 this week. We expect Damian Williams to get an 80 to 90% of the David Montgomery workload. Khalil Herbert probably to take over the previous Damian Williams workload, 5 to 10 touches per game, 20 to 40% of the snaps. But Damian Williams should lock down that primary running back status for the Chicago Bears. We've seen Damian Williams be productive, be efficient, and be good with a big workload in the past in Kansas City. So he is someone that I'm absolutely willing to rely on as a top 20 running back. He is my RB20 on the week. Number 2 on the list is Zach Moss. Zach Moss is getting all of the valuable work basically for the Buffalo Bills offense, running over 55% of the snaps since he's been back. His routes have been climbing each and every week up around 50%, and Singletaries have fallen promptly to about 30%. Zach Moss gets the majority of the short down and distance goal line work, long down and distance, and the 2-minute drill work. He basically has the primary role in every facet of the Bills running back core, which is going to be valuable, especially in a game that projects to be as high scoring as Bills and Chiefs does. Number 3 on the list is Damian Harris of the New England Patriots. Damian Harris should be in a much more favorable matchup this week than he was last week against Tampa Bay. The Houston Texans are 31st in rush DVOA, and it should be wheels up for Damian Harris. We know he gets 15 to 20 carries in matchups like this, where he has a good positive game script and a good chance to be running the ball against a bad run defense. So he is a guy that I definitely like this week. Number 4 is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs actually saw basically the worst case scenario last week. 15 of 17 opportunities in what was a horrible game script for Josh Jacobs as a guy that primarily relies on the Raiders winning games and being ahead so that he can run the ball. This week presents a much more positive game script for him. And even last week when it was negative, he still saw 15 of the 17 running back touches. Peyton Barber is also out for this game. Josh Jacobs definitely has a chance to carry the ball 18, 20 times in this game and get into the end zone, as the Raiders are almost a touchdown favorite at home in this game. Number 5 is a little bit more of a hot take or a little bit more of a reach, if you guys want to call it that, is Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders is actually a pretty good start in this game. I have him currently inside my top 26 running backs. This game is essentially a pick'em between the Eagles and Panthers. The Eagles are currently 3-point road underdogs right now, which if they were at home, it would be basically an even game. Sanders has only run the ball 9 times in 2 straight blowout losses where the Eagles were playing catch up the last 2 weeks. This game, in my opinion, should be a lot closer, allowing for the Eagles to stick to the run a lot more. He's still getting the usage of the backfield. They just have abandoned the run at every turn over the last 2 games. As you guys can see on the screen, Miles Sanders still running the most snaps, still getting the most rushing attempts, still running the most routes, still getting the short down and distance inside the 5 work. We know Kenny Gainwell is going to be involved in the passing game, but I expect this game to be a little bit more in favor of Miles Sanders than it is in Kenny Gainwell's favor. So the sits at the running back position are Samaje Perine. Now, this is assuming that Joe Mixon is out, that he's a sit, because obviously if Joe Mixon plays, then he's definitely a sit. But we've heard them basically talking about using a committee with Chris Evans and some of the other running backs that they have on the roster if Joe Mixon is out. This is also an offense and an offensive line that hasn't allowed for Joe Mixon himself to be very efficient. So the fact that an inferior back like Perine is going to take over 80% of his workload, it doesn't really excite me as anything more than like a top 35 running back. And I think you should have better options than Samaje Perine this week. Number 2 on the list is Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is banged up in this matchup, and the Steelers are a pass funnel defense, ranking top 10 against the run, but bottom 10 against the pass. So I expect Courtland Sutton, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick to be the ones that do the damage for the Broncos in this game and not the running backs. I also think you can sit Javonte Williams as well. Jamal Williams, on the other hand, for the Detroit Lions has been relegated to the grinder role of this offense, which makes his role much less valuable than it was when he and DeAndre Swift were kind of in a 50-50 split. Jamal Williams is no longer involved in the passing game after only running 10% of the routes this past week, which was a season low for Jamal Williams. And he's been out-targeted 18-5 by DeAndre Swift since week 2. His only hope really for achieving a good game is stealing a goal line carry away from DeAndre Swift. So what you're looking at with Jamal Williams is a guy that's probably going to get 10 to 15 carries and maybe 1 or 2 targets, but they're not very valuable. They're like 3rd and 2s. 4th and 1s, 2nd and 3s. Like those are the type of carries he's getting. DeAndre Swift is getting the valuable stuff, the receiving work, the long down and distance work, and the goal line work for the most part. So that's Jamal Williams. I probably wouldn't be starting him this week either. Now, the number 4 guy on this list is Latavius Murray. I just think this backfield's a big mess of gross, basically. Already hampered by Lamar Jackson taking away a vast majority of the carries for the Ravens backfield. I know Murray had 18 carries last week, but I expect this backfield to be a hot hand approach week in and week out. Maybe even Tyson Williams is active for this game because he was out for last week's game. The backfield makes Murray's workload a little bit hard to trust, in my opinion, unpredictable week over week. So he's not a guy that I can start as anything more than a desperation RB3. I currently have him at RB35 in my rankings this week. Number 5, the last sit at the running back position is Myles Gaskin. He could have pass catching appeal in a game that we expect the Bucs to stop the run against Malcolm Brown between the tackles. But Myles Gaskin is a guy with a tough rushing matchup. He's simply too risky for me after logging a season low 23% of the snaps, being out-touched, out-targeted, and running less routes than a guy like Malcolm Brown. So even though this projects to be more of a Myles Gaskin game, maybe they still use Malcolm Brown in that receiving workload because they did use him that way last week. So moving on from running backs to the wide receiver position, we're going to start with Marvin Jones, who is my number 1 start at the wide receiver position this week. Prior to last week's dud, Marvin Jones saw 8+ targets in 3 straight games to start the season. DJ Chark is now out for the year, out for a good majority of time now. And this Titans defense just allowed Zach Wilson, Corey Davis, and Jamison Crowder to absolutely torch them through the air. And that has been a trend all season for the Titans defense. They just absolutely cannot stop the pass. One of the top 10 defenses or top 5 defenses in expected fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. So I really like Marvin Jones to get 8 to 10 targets in this game, potentially get into the end zone or a big play or two. So T. Higgins, the next guy on the list here, is coming off of an injury, of course, but he's set to see Jair Alexander's backup in coverage because Jair Alexander has a shoulder injury and should be out for this game, leaving Jamar Chase matched up with Eric Stokes, who is the best corner left standing on the Packers roster right now. I think T. Higgins has the best matchup on the field, which is why I think he could have a good game coming 20 days or so off of the injury that he sustained. I think he should be okay and ready to go in this one. He's already been declared that he is playing. The next guy on the list is Michael Pittman Jr. This guy is averaging 9 targets per game this season, and he has 32 targets over the last 3 weeks. The Ravens have been beatable through the air. He's an every week wide receiver 3, in my opinion, with the usage that he's seeing, running over almost 100% of his team's routes and getting 32 targets over the last 3 weeks. I know Carson Wentz is going to frustrate the hell out of you if you're a Michael Pittman owner, but he still needs to be in your lineup each and every week as a wide receiver 3 or flex play. Number 4 is Antonio Brown. The Dolphins are really tough to beat deep, so you have to work over the middle against them. And to me, that points to Mike Evans having a down game, and it should be a good game for guys like Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, who are more involved in that middle of the field area, short to intermediate range, because they're going to have to pick up the slack for the fact that they can't get a lot of deep plays going with Mike Evans matched up against Xavier Howard and being and the Bucs struggling to pass the ball downfield. AB also saw an uptick last week in his routes as the team shifted towards more of a base 11 personnel offense with Rob Gronkowski out for this game. So I expect them to run again 70-80% of the routes for Antonio Brown, given the fact that they don't really have a solid tight end that they can rely on with Cameron Brate and OJ Howard kind of mixing in as the backup tight end. So moving on to the last start at the wide receiver position, it's in the same game. It's Jalen Waddle. To me, Jalen Waddle is in a absolutely prime matchup spot. He's one of my favorite DFS plays this week because Jamel Dean and Richard Sherman on the outside for Tampa Bay. Jamel Dean is one of the Bucs starting corners that had been out for a while, but he is back now. Those two guys are on the outside and they should be okay, holding their own against guys like Devontae Parker. But the weak link in this secondary is Ross Cockrell in the slot. In week 3, Jalen Waddle took advantage of another easy slot matchup against the Raiders to the tune of 12 receptions and 13 targets. He can do the exact same thing in this game against the Bucs. And this is the type of receiver that we have problems as a Bucs fan. I know my team. We have problems stopping electric, fast receivers like this. It's the reason that Cooper Kupp, who's a slot receiver, and Jacoby Myers, who's a slot receiver, both had great games against us the last 2 weeks. Now, moving on to the sits At wide receiver, Allen Robinson is my number one sit on the week. Now, again, Allen Robinson was a guy a lot of people drafted in like the third, fourth round of their fantasy draft. So they're probably not going to want to sit Allen Robinson. But I'm telling you, if you have better options, you should. He has yet to finish higher than wide receiver 49 this season. I need to see it first with Allen Robinson. He needs to actually prove that he's still the number one receiver that you drafted him to be. This offense is throwing at the 31st rate in the NFL right now. They have a rookie quarterback who's struggling to get his legs under him. And this game should be one that the Raiders get after Justin Fields, and it could make the offense anemic in general. So this is a game that I don't want to start Allen Robinson in, basically, point blank, period. Number 2 on the list is Kenny Golladay, a guy that I also want to sit this week because he draws Trevon Diggs in shadow coverage, who's basically been a lockdown corner so far this year. I expect Saquon Barkley in the run game and in the passing game, Daniel Jones maybe running the ball a little bit, Kadarius Toney, Evan Ingram to pick up the slack for the fact that Kenny Golladay has a tough matchup in this one. I just don't think they're going to look his way a whole lot in this game. Number 3 on the list is Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk went from a 90% snap share and a 90% route rate last week or in week 3 down to a 70% route rate for the Niners last week. People will be tempted to start Brandon Ayuk because George Kittle is going to be out for this game. But in my opinion, he's simply too risky to trust on a limited route tree with a rookie quarterback making his first start. And maybe this offense shifts to more of a run-heavy offense with Trey Lance in his first start. So this is a guy that I don't really want to trust. I know George Kittle is out, but I think you probably are going to be disappointed if you throw Brandon and Ayuk into your lineup unless you're playing in a deep tournament in DFS or something like that. So number 4 on the list is Robbie Anderson. I'm not chasing the 11 targets that he had last week. This Eagles defense has been great against wide receivers, aside from Tyreek Hill torching them last week. So he's a guy that I'm not willing to start. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, the final sit of the week on this week 5 fantasy football slate, is a sit candidate pretty much every week, but with Claypool back and Bryce Callahan being his primary matchup in the slot, there's absolutely no way he sniffs my lineup this week. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know some of your must starts, must sits in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, please hit the like button. It helps us out tremendously. It costs you nothing. It takes you 2 seconds. If you watch the videos and you get our advice, I want to expect that all of you guys are hitting the like on every single one of our videos. And if you watch our videos and are not yet subscribed yet, what the hell are you doing? It's also free to do. Hit the subscribe button. Also hit the notification button so you know anytime we post a video. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.